My father is a GregTech fanatic. Half of our apartment is covered in multi-block machines. On average once a month someone steps into a low-voltage conduit or a cogwheel and they have to go to the hospital because they got either electrocuted or maimed. The second half of our apartment is filled to the brim with printed recipes, forge crash logs, large bronze boilers etc. Every week my dad takes a look at all the CurseForge pages to gather all the new tech mods. I was foolish enough to teach him into Discord because I thought we will save some bandwidth, but now he not only downloads the mods but also rots on some obscure Discord channels and subreddits for modded Mac players and participates in shitstorms about the best or doubling automations etc. He can scream at the monitor or throw a keyboard out of the window. Once upon a time when he tilted me I made an account there and trolled him by typing some random shit in his threads like Botania is a tech mod. My mother couldn't keep up with cooking bigos for him to calm down. By now on one of the servers he has a high voltage rank for racking up 10k posts. When GTNH updates he plays it every day. For like 5 years now I've been making autocrafting contraptions on his server every Sunday while he rambles about the supremacy of this overcomplicated shit. I managed to get into uni. He said it's thanks to Greg, because there's a lot of phosphor in the recipes and it makes my brain work better. Every Saturday him and his friend wake up the entire family with the sound of their quarry running, or processing etc. Every time we eat together he starts ranting about tech mods and each time the topic gets derailed into mumbling about Reddit, he gets hyper and gets butthurt. He walks out and proceeds to read Google spreadsheets about the most efficient ways to complete GTNH to calm down. This year he set up his own server for Christmas. Of course he didn't last till the Christmas Eve and turned it on in our living room. He spent the entire day tinkering with the server in the middle of the room. The dinner, on a cogwheel-shaped plate, was also eaten there. Once, when I was still in either elementary or middle school, it was my birthday, so my father as a gift let me onto his supersymmetry server as an exception. Nice gift bitch. We had a trip beyond our main base. We walk up to what looked like an AI-generated junkyard and my dad's eyes are already glowing and he's licking his lips all turned on. He lays down a shit ton of equipment and we're sitting there staring at a bunch of rusty cogs and hooked up cables. After 5 minutes I got bored so I pull out my music and he hit me with his hand. The machinery can hear my music through my headphones and the sound frequencies make it run worse. When I wanted to scratch my ass he started to yell, so that I'll stop twisting around because the sound-activated sensors trip and slow down the process. I had to sit there motionless for 6 hours straight and look at crafting processes like in smoking Guantanamo. My birthday is in November so everything was white and boring. He installed Serene Seasons with Windows internal clock integration. At some point he stood up, walked 15 meters from the PC and farted claiming that Greg listens. I mentioned that my father had a friend named Nirmat with whom he plays tech mod packs. Prior to that it was Vazkiai who accompanied him on his journeys. A ball-shaped man with a stash wearing a bomber vest 365 days per year. Him and my father were almost like brothers. He would come to our house with his wife Jenny for Christmas etc. At some point my dad had his name Day and Vazkiai visited us for a chalice. They got shit-faced drunk and obviously they talked about Greg and assembly lines. They started yelling at each other, whether, in general, mechanism or project is better.
Don't WACK with me VAZKII. Have you ever seen the MULTIBLOCKSMEKANISM has? Place a few and the server TPS goes to shit. That's how powerful they are. For Vux Sake Vasco EMC values the table can store R in the TRILLIONS, your MULTIBLOCKS can suck ITS. Why the fuck are you MENTIONINS the table if you can BARELY craft a basic or a double? MEKANISM is the king of mods like a lion is the king of the jungle.
And so they begun to wrestle on the floor and me and my mother had to separate them. After that they stopped talking to each other. Last year Vazkiai's wife called saying that he kicked the bucket and that we're invited to the funeral. It so happened that it was my mom who picked up the phone. She gave her condolences, put down the phone and told my father, and he goes like,
Very UCKING good.
That's how much he hated him for his Project E. I also mentioned my dad's arch-nemesis in the form of fanatic. It became my father's obsession. He stopped frequenting non-FTB subreddits and discords because he was upset that they don't discuss tech mods and FTB dramas. The CEO of fanatic was a guy named Wade. For my father, he's the embodiment of all harm tech mod packs were ever met with on the subreddit, and my dad was at war with him for years. Once in the past he attended some meeting where Wade was talking and he came back home in a torn-up shirt, because they had to make him leave with force. That's the kind of tantrums he threw while in there. After his defeat during the physical encounter with the armed forces of FTB, he began his partisan mission on the internet. He was throwing random bullshit at him, like saying that Wade was an undercover Russian agent. I didn't teach my dad into Torso attended with a police visit for defamation and he had to pay Wade $2,000. When he was paying, the house was unlivable for a week. He was cursing at FTB, Wade and the entire world in general. According to him, FTB members were some Masons running the world from the shadows, pulling the strings and having their people everywhere. He was also calculating how long he could keep playing on his server, paying for electricity with these $2,000. My dad decided sometime during the last year that he absolutely needs to build a Stargate to power his entire machine setup, because the current methods are too troublesome and don't produce enough EU.
Sona Stargate is vgereizat, de energoflofin immense.
But he could neither afford it at his current tier nor had he the space to contain it. And since he's not going to pay someone for help, he invited some local GTNH players on his server, and they'll play for free and be able to use his conduits if they build him a base large enough for it. At first they cooperated pretty well, but during one of the weekends my dad got sick and he couldn't go questing with them and he had a huge headache over it. Additionally, his friends would call him and brag about how good the RNG is today, so my dad was just laying down on the bed red from anger while puffing angrily. Finally he reached the conclusion that it's unjust that they are advancing without him, and at night, when these guys stopped playing, darted out of the bed unexpectedly. After an hour he came back and tells me that I have to help him with something on his PC. I accompany him to the room and I see GTNH loaded up with him standing on someone else's section of the base. I ask what he's doing and he tells me that he's griefing his pipes and robbing him of the items he got during his absence. Fortunately he realized that he has no space for all the pipes, so he just placed them in the middle of the base. Using some chains he attached them to a boiler of some sort and he began logging out of the server. But suddenly two people join. The other guys who realized that something's wrong. A hug shitstorm commenced because he started yelling about the items and that my dad has to give them back, but he screams that they lied to him, and that he contributed a ton to the world but he couldn't progress during the weekend. I tried to calm them down so that he doesn't get embarrassed cause it was close. After a few minutes the situation looked as follows. My dad standing next to the Stargate, saying it's his. The other guys yelling that he has to give it back. One of them is on half a heart because he tried to forcefully remove my father. 2 iron golems built by that guy approaching my father angrily. Mobs looking at them from every direction. My mother crying and begging my father to leave it alone and trying to somehow make the golems stop. At last, the golems pulled my father away from the Stargate. I gave the other guys the FTB chunk so that they could get their pipes back while they throw some cables at my father as payment, and saying he can't use the Stargate anymore and that he better pray they never meet again on a public server. My mom managed to convince the golems not to finish my father off. The guy who was at half a heart decided he will just eat some steak and heal it back up, so no point making a fuss about it. He just doesn't want to see my father ever again.